Good afternoon, my friends. I'm Tosca DiMatteo, and this is Talk About It Tuesday on March 22nd, 2022. I am so excited to be here. Last week I took a week off, and I'm excited to bring in the new season of spring with you all and this wonderful conversation with Susana Boey. And she's a former coworker of mine. Hello, Leslie. Great to see you. And we're going to talk about practical passion. And before I bring her on, for those of you who are new to the platform, I just want to say I have these conversations with diverse perspectives and experiences weekly in order to bring leadership tips and tools, self-development and healing ideas to you so you can live your best life. And Susana is definitely going to help you live your best life. So I'm going to bring her on right now. Let's hope this technology is working here. Hi, Cycle Chick. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, Susana.
Hello.
How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have you on and see your beautiful face. We have some familiar faces in the audience, I think.
No, I'm so excited.
Yes, Leslie here sharing her love. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on this platform to share your story, your brilliance, your perspective on practical passion on your career journey. And I just want to say, Susana, we met years ago back in corporate life, and you were always just shine so bright. And I'm just so honored that you're in my orbit, that we're able to connect in this way, and I can hold space for your story so the audience, both live and after the fact, can learn from your grace and from your wisdom. So thank you for making the time.
Thanks for inviting me. I was so excited for the opportunity and excited for this combo.
Yeah, me too. And I understand you have a very exciting milestone that we're celebrating as well this week.
I hit a year officially in business, at least according to the government, of filing my LLC. So a big milestone.
Yes, that is huge. Congrats. We'll definitely talk more about that. And again, just welcome Monique and Nomad Grants and Ashley. Everybody's kind of who's joining live. This is exciting. And so the way that I usually start, Susanna, is just to kind of open up the floor and have you share who you are, like what are the experiences in your life that kind of shaped who you are. And then, I'm sure that will wind us into the topic, but just to kind of give folks some of your background and how you got to this point today.
Yeah. So I my whole life have been a storyteller, which is what I normally tell people. I know that word is starting a lot, maybe too much, but it's always described me, and so I still hold on to it. I started acting in plays since I was about 4 or 5 years old, and so like that really was my trajectory for a long time, was theater and figuring out how to embody other people's stories and make them my own. I grew up in Georgia to a multicultural household. My mom's Colombian, my dad is from farmland, Tennessee. And so there's always been sort of this, I wouldn't say a clash, but always a mixture, a marrying of things. Never a this or that, but really a how do these things pair together? And that is something that throughout my life, like how do we bring things together and create something new out of it? So that was kind of where I started with life. I was on this track. I studied theater at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! I know there are a couple alums watching.
And I just wait before you keep going. I just want to. There's a little bit of in and out on the audio, and I don't know if it's just my audio or if people listening are hearing a little crack breaking up.
Is that better?
I think that is better. Yeah.
Okay. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, yeah, that feels clearer. Okay, thank you. I want to miss a word. I don't want to miss a word.
No. So let me know if that doesn't work out. I've been having some audio issues with my technology. So, yeah, like that was really where I thought that things were going to go. And as I started to finish my degree, I started to think about whether the dream that I had thought my whole life was really the dream. And that's where part of our conversation is going to go today is like, what happens if the thing that you've been chasing for so long, you suddenly realize isn't the thing that you want to chase anymore. And I have a distinct memory of, you asked kind of what things shaped who I am. I have a distinct memory of being at a master's program interview in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, in a blizzard, sitting alone in my hotel room. And I got this distinct sense that this is not for you. And so I got offered full ride scholarships into several programs, and I called them back and said, thank you, but no thank you. And everyone told me that I was crazy. How could you turn down an MFA program that's paid for? And I couldn't explain it at the time. The way that my story took kind of a turn, it suddenly made so much sense. But I really had to come to terms with, okay, well, now that my dream is different, now that I'm moving in a different direction, what does that say about me? Do I have permission to do that from society, from people, from myself? And does it mean that I'm a failure? Like, those were kind of the questions that I had to start wrestling with as I chose a new path.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing. There's just a few different areas I kind of want to ask about. And the first one that kind of sticks out is, you talked about really being excited about embodying other people's stories. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear more about, like what that was for you. Was it about bringing yourself to those stories? Was it about maybe putting your stuff aside so that, you know what I mean? Because sometimes it's like a distraction of like, well, I don't want to be me, so let me be somebody else. I'm just curious, like what was the excitement for you in embodying other people's stories?
I can speak about what that excitement is now, because I think it's very similar to what it was when I was on stage. What I do now for people is help them get the story of the new business that they're launching out into the world. I know that I'm in the right place because you're right. The joy that comes from that is immense. And it's because I can tell when I talk to my clients that they know exactly what they want to communicate, and yet somehow they don't. Like it's in there somewhere in I tell people that what I do is I help them untangle, because they have everything they know inside. And I think of it kind of like as a ball of yarn that a cat probably got into, right? And like, they just need help teasing it out and untangling it, and perhaps knitting it into like something that looks like a sweater, right? But like all of the raw materials are there. And so it really isn't about inserting myself into their story. It's about almost like ushering it in. Like I'm the person that's helping hold the other end of the yarn and then teaching them how to knit, or perhaps, taking over a little bit. Like I'm just helping bring out the story that was already there, help put words to what they already know, to these feelings and values, and just all of the vision that they have for where they want to go and what they want to say to people. And so that feeling when I show them what we've built, the look on their face of like, that was it. Like that was it the whole time. I just didn't know. Thanks for bringing it to life. So like, that's really where it comes from.
Yeah. Like in a way, the word that came up for me when you were sharing that story was like interpreter, like in a way.
Yeah. Sense.
Yeah. And so, and that makes me go back to and think about what you said about, growing up in a household with different cultural backgrounds, and like that it's always, I think the phrase you use, like it's always been like a marriage of sorts of things. And like, what has that meant in terms of how you went through life with like this marriage of things. Like how did it impact you to see maybe very, I don't know how you saw it, whether it was this common humanity or very different things coming together. Like, I don't know what your perspective, or maybe both. Maybe it's an and not an or. I don't know.
It's both. There were things that were very different, and there were things that I was like, oh, like there's a lot of overlap between Latino culture and Southern culture. For example, like hospitality is huge, being like an easy example. But like one that maybe wasn't as obvious is that like we celebrated on Christmas Eve and then we celebrated on Christmas Day, totally different ways of celebrating the same holiday. And we just did both. Like it wasn't about choosing, it was how do we honor the traditions of both. And within that, and that's where I think the beauty is, and what I've carried across to everything I've done is we're not just separating both separately. How do we then create a new tradition that brings them together? So it wasn't all my mom's way and it wasn't all my dad's way. It was like pieces of both that still felt full. It's this concept of like when we're mixed, I don't feel 50% Colombian and 50% American, even though that may be the reality. I feel fully both. I feel 100% both. And so that's what I carry into the work that I do. I have stories that I'm trying to tell for people, and they're like, well, I need to come across really professional and expert at what I do. But I also have a really good sense of humor, and I'm really fun, and I want to come across really friendly. So it's about how do we marry those two things to make sure the story we're telling is 100% both. So you don't have to water down anything to create a story that balances two things.
Yes, holler to not watering it down. Let's not water life down. Why? I love it. Well, and I want to go back to as well, and I'm sure we'll circle back around to this, but I wanted to go back to something very, I think, important for people to hear, which was when you had that, I know you didn't use the word like instinct, but when you had that kind of knowing of like, oh my gosh, this like master's program is not for me. And then, and you talked about, oh my gosh, am I crazy? And everybody, and the external messages are telling me like, I should do this, and why am I not? So talk to me about, I'd love to hear if you're willing to just share a little bit more about that, because I think that we often have a hard time honoring what's true for us, even if we don't understand what that puzzle piece is all about in the moment. We just know that this piece isn't for us right now.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. The only way that I can explain it is that the instinct was so strong that there was like no question. Like what people in that moment, which is interesting for me because as a people pleaser, I worry constantly about what people think about me. But I think like God or the universe or whoever, whatever you think, like was doing me a favor in that moment, because a few months later, my dad got very ill and I had to move home to take care of him. I would not have been able to do that were I in the program. I would have had to drop out. Like it was complicated. So like I had the confirmation very quickly that the instinct was there for a reason. It's not always the case. We may have to wait a long time to understand why we feel that we're going in a different direction. So I think because of the strength of it, I was able to sort of tune out the noise. But what took me longer to sort out was the guilt, was this sense of almost like lost identity because my dream had shifted, because like I was so hyper focused on what I thought I was going to do. Do you know how they say that you should always have Post-it notes by your bed in case you come up with brilliant? So last night in the middle of the night, I like woke up and wrote down, because I was thinking about this interview today, and I think about how we tell people all the time to chase the dream, to follow the dream. And I had this sudden realization that when we do that, we give the dream way too much power. So we're chasing this thing and it feels almost like a carrot on a stick, because we're thinking about what it will feel like when we get there. And everything we're doing is in service to the dream. So then the dream gets put on a pedestal and we're like, it's all about the dream. So then what if the dream gets knocked off of the pedestal? Or we come to this realization that perhaps a dream needs to be different. I think this happens a lot if it's a dream we've been chasing for a long time. Because then there's this sense of sunk cost. Like, okay, but I've put in all this effort and time and energy into chasing this dream. And so we feel the sense of of loss. And like, what do I do now? There's a sense of, am I a failure because perhaps I didn't actually make it? Like, I didn't actually get to the thing that I've been working so hard for. And I think that that's so funny not in a ha-ha way, because when we choose to stop chasing these certain dreams, most of the time it's because we realize that there's something better for us. We're making a shift in a direction because we've taken stock of what we need in this season. So again, the longer you chase it, I think the more this happens. You're like, gosh, I'm not the person that I was when I was 20 and I picked this dream. I need different things now. And yet we still feel like we failed or that we're settling. And so we really, in those moments, I've had to do it several times, almost like sit ourselves down and talk to us and say, you know, this is okay. Like, no one's going to think that. And even if they do, who cares?
Right.
You're making the best choice for you. And so really like giving ourselves the green light to make shifts. As we've talked about, giving ourselves permission for the dream to change. It's not something we talk about a lot.
Yeah, I love this too because, well, there's a few different things I want to pull out. Like, one question is, how have you been able to approach like honoring when things change for you and knowing like that you mentioned being like a people pleaser. My husband is a people pleaser too. I had him on last year and we had like, it's really, really hard. So yeah, I just like, maybe we just go there for a second and I'll come back to some other questions, but like, yeah, like how do you quiet those voices in your head that want to make everybody happy so that you can make yourself happy first?
Well, I kind of would do it the opposite. I would sit with myself first and I ask myself a series of questions to determine what it is that I need in this season, to like assess. And then once I come to that decision, then I can quiet the voices, because I can always come back to, no, you know what you need. Because if you start with the other voices, it actually, I find that it taints your own decisions about what you need and where you're going and what you want and what your own dreams are. So it has to happen the other way around, at least for me.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Start with your truth and then see clearly that part of you that's saying something else, that's worried about the external reactions.
Because you always have that centering decision to come back to. Like, I remember telling my parents that I was going to quit my corporate job. And I was like, oh my God. Like, what are they, my dad worked at the same company for 25 years. He like worked his way up the corporate ladder. My mom is like very traditional Latina. And when I would even like mention like, oh, I'm thinking about like maybe interviewing at other companies, she'd be like, no, you still need to grow where you are, like stay put. Right. And so I thought, oh gosh, if she's terrified of me even like looking at other roles, like what is she going to think when I'm just like, I'm just quitting. I'm like going out on my own. But I had to make sure that I was sure about my decision and that nothing that they would say would sway me before I took it to them.
Yeah, that's like really good advice, and advice that I need to take myself, which is sometimes I share things before it's settled in myself, and then when somebody else reacts, I'm like, wah! I'm like, right, I'm so thrown off because I haven't honored that is my truth fully. And I think that can happen, especially like different people process differently, and sometimes we want to trust, but the reality is that it's hard for other people to be able to hold space for a seedling of idea.
You have to have people in your life that have that role. Yes. Like that you can like test drive thoughts when you're not sure about them and know, to your point, that it's a safe space to test it. But those are very few people, and like you need to know who they are, because otherwise you will get thrown.
Well, and I'm curious because I think this, comes up a lot, certainly in coaching and the work that I do, right? Which is like when we change, like when we grow, when we transform, and when we stand in our truth, sometimes the people that we have surrounded ourselves with, some of them may fall out. And
That's
I'm
true.
and that can be a loss as well, and that can be something to grieve. And I'm curious because you know, I know in several times of your life you've had to say, I got to make a left turn here, or I got to make a right turn here. And have you experienced that as well? That like some people um, are not able to stay with you as you are kind of raising your vibration and moving on in your life?
Um, I've been lucky to say it's only happened a couple of times. Very lucky because I've
Mm,
seen it happen to a lot of people
mm,
where you grow and other people are like, I'm not ready for you to grow because I haven't grown. You see a lot with people that start going to therapy and they're like, I'm going to become a better person. And I'm like, I'm going to grow. And then the other people are like, I don't know what to do
mm,
with this. But with my like life shifts, my the spoiler, my parents were so supportive that my jaw dropped to the floor. They were like, "You can do anything you set your mind to. We're proud of you." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what? Like, is there a connection
mm,
issue?" Um, I was nervous to tell my husband because he's also like a very straight and narrow
mm,
type of person, and I was like, I really have this dream that I thought
mm,
that I had abandoned of traveling the
mm.
world, but like I think I want to do it again. I think I want to put all our stuff in storage and I want to just test this. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to quit my job and start my own company. Is that cool with you? And he was like, he had the same reaction my parents. Yeah, sure, you're great at whatever you try. So like, all right, like let's just talk logistics again. Like, so not everyone has the
Mm,
experience that I have
mm.
had, and so I do acknowledge that that has made my journey easier. Um, but it's a gift, and I think it speaks to it's very important to me to cultivate relationships.
Mm.
It's part of my it's the good side of the people pleasing, right? So I
Mm.
my friends are few but quality.
Mm.
My
Mhm.
circle is small but mighty. Um, and so that's helped to have the support that I've needed.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that because I think that I do. The word discernment comes up when I think about you and being choiceful about who you surround yourself with, um, and it's like a reminder to everybody out there, right? Like if you don't have people like that in your life that will support you ride or die, like support your dreams, then like let's start making some new connections because we all deserve that
Right.
kind of support in our life. And it's not to say yes, we all need some grounding sometimes, and like if you're going out and like you're gonna like fall off a cliff, like that's one thing, but you know, to just say let's go do it because we're so risk averse as a
Yes.
society, as a culture, and then we leave the best part of ourselves on the table, I think, because we're not willing to say, well, let's just go see. And actually, that reminds me of a book that's recently out. I think Dan Smith, about not having regrets,
Mm.
and the biggest, you know, he did a whole lot of research. There's a lot of research that shows that people don't regret what they did as much as they regret what they didn't do.
That's
I
why we decided to go travel because it was one of those things that I knew that I would
Yeah.
regret. And I had abandoned the dream when I started to work in corporate because I thought, well, there's just no way. Like the way that the world works, um, I barely had enough vacation days to like go home at Christmas, right? Like I wasn't going to travel the world, much less like live in a place for a month at a time. Um, so like I had just given up on that
Mm,
dream. And when there came an inkling of possibility that it was perhaps possible again, that was the feeling that I got. If
mm,
I don't at least try this, at least for
mm,
one, even if I just go one place and do it once to say that I
mm.
did, I will regret not having tried it.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to live with that regret.
Well, you know, and it makes me think too that I think there's a difference also in how we view our dreams, how we're articulating it. Are we attached to it looking a certain way, or are we able to dig deeper and understand what is really at the root of that dream?
Yes.
And that could go for, right, whether you're looking at what do I want for my career or like what do I want for myself, because we could say, "Oh, I want to travel." And like I'm with you on that, you know, like And what's the deeper thing about the travel that's important? Like, right? Because maybe it could look different. And so I'm curious, like how talking about permission to change a dream, and also is it about not having attachment to the outcome for you, or like, what is it?
Yeah, so this is how I even got into this headspace. When I decided to not move forward with theater, I actually didn't have a plan of I didn't have a plan of what was next. And so I had to put myself, to this day, I don't know how me as like I think it was like 23-ish, how 23-year-old me came up with this, because I still use it to this day. And I'm like, thank you, past me. Like, this is beyond your years somehow. So, but I put myself through a series of questioning, to determine what the dream could look like. So essentially what I did was try to look at my core wants, needs, and desires, and then retrofit a career or a path or a dream or a choice to meet and fulfill those needs. And I had never been taught to approach career and work that way. And so that's kind of what I mean by practical passion. So I eased into it. I said, okay, well, all you know is that you love theater. You had this dream about theater. Well, okay, well, what is it? And so it was about peeling back the layers. What is it that you love about theater? Be more specific, be more specific, be more specific. And as I got specific, I started to get really tangible answers about what it was that I loved. And then I started to ease into changing the dream. And I started to get honest about the things that sometimes we don't admit to ourselves when we're chasing a dream, which is like the dark side of things, because there's good and bad to every dream. And so I said, okay, well, but like, be really honest with yourself. What is it about a career in theater that you don't like, that you never really admitted that you were going to put up with because it was the dream? And it was things like, I don't want to be hustling for the next like show. I don't really love the idea of not having health insurance. I want to have a family, and so this like weird schedule may not work, things like that. And so as I started to create these things, they became lists of things that really bring me joy, lists of things that I'd rather avoid if I could, lists of things where I feel most in my element. It was like, well, I like project-based work, and I really liked collaboration with a team, and I really want to be creative and tell stories, but I want benefits and stability and a regular schedule. And by asking myself those questions, that's actually how I ended up looking at jobs in the corporate side of television. I never would have considered the corporate side of television or media in general until I said, oh, well, actually, this job that I had never considered checks all the boxes. I will have a very fulfilled career, meets the needs of what I need right now in this season, and it brings me joy. It still feeds my passions. And so that's where I got to the point of believing and taking with me through life that dreams are really meant to be wrestled with, tried on for size, remodeled. They're not fixed. And I think we think that they're fixed. And that's part of the biggest mistake that we make when we talk about dreams or passions.
And I am curious, because, I understand, like, you're a spiritual being, I'm a spiritual being, and, this idea of, like, co-creation, like, we're not in control, we have some control, like, so how does that factor in for you, that, like, there's so much of life not in our control, but we're trying to figure it out, but like we also want to allow for like miracles and something even better to happen than we even imagine. So like I'm, if you're willing to talk about like what does that look like for you, or do you wrestle with that, or maybe it's just me, like I don't know.
No, it's ask my therapist. So I'm a people pleaser, but I'm also a perfectionist. Meaning that I try to control things in my life that I can't control. And there's a lot of anxiety that comes from trying to control things that I can't control. And so it is a constant balance and reminding myself of making choices and making moves in the general direction But as my therapist continues to remind me, and it's something that I've written down in giant, leave room for mystery.
Mm.
Leave room for mystery, which is uncomfortable. Leave room for the miraculous, right? For the things that you've never expected. And if we try to control too many things, then we lose that ability, right? Like there's not space for things to shift in ways that are better than we ever expected, perhaps.
I love that. And like, trust. I'm right with you on that journey. And now I'm like, yes, I need a sign that says leave room for mystery or
Leave
miracles
room for
or
mystery.
yes.
Yeah, it's really helpful for when I'm trying to control things that really aren't in
Yeah.
my control.
Yeah. Yeah, I have been grappling with this concept too, which is like, you know, um, what does it look like to try to control things, because it can be sneaky. And I think that part of it is that idea of, are we being expansive in our understanding of our desires so that we leave room for it to look like something we couldn't imagine? Or are we hooked on, or I should say, am I hooked on, like it looking like this? Like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. And then we're not even realizing that there's so much else, you know?
Yeah. Two things on that. I think one of the most dangerous phrases when we're trying to determine what we need and want and the direction we want to move in our lives is the phrase supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten myself in the most trouble in life when I've said things like, oh, I'm supposed to do this, or I'm not supposed to feel this, or it's not supposed to be this way. Who decides what supposed to even is, right? All those things are so personal that's a big trap that we fall into, and it goes with the should have, would have,
Yeah.
could have conversation, right? Like we
Yeah.
get stuck in a place where we limit the possibilities. We put ourselves into a box of what we're seeing. To your point about, it really is supposed to look this way. I think that's really common. I think that we set expectations based on what we've seen before, and based on options that are put in front of us. So I think the reason that, going back to this idea of like retrofitting the choices into what I needed, that felt novel to me because for so much of my life and for many of our lives, because we all, like a lot of us, go through the US education system, there's sort of an illusion of choice. Do you want the red pill or do you want the blue pill? Pick one, right? And so we pick one and we think, wow, like I picked my career path. Do you want to work in banking or do you want to work in tech? Do you want to go to college or do you want to go to college? For me, like that was like
Right.
there are certain things that like it wasn't do you want to go to college or not, it was do you want to go to this college or this college. And so when I got to the place where I was actually exploring other options, it felt like life snuck up on me and was like, did you know that there's been a green pill this entire time? Did you know that there were other options that you've never even considered?
Yes.
Like I'm not even talking about when I decided to like quit my job and start my own business, even as far back as to working in corporate media. I studied mass media arts and no one actually ever talked about that there were jobs on the corporate side. Even a shift just that small, everyone that I was studying with was like, I'm gonna make movies. I'm gonna be like on set and in production. My first time on set, Tosca, I hated it. And I was like, oh no, I picked this career. What am I gonna
do? Oops.
Oops. But no one like talked to me and said, hey, like, there's way more jobs in this field. Did you know? Yeah. And so it's this letting go of how things are supposed to look and opening up our eyes into all of these other possibilities and being okay with the fact, to your point, that they will most likely look different than we expected, but they will also most likely fulfill our needs better than the choices that were placed in front of us.
Right. Yeah, and Oh my gosh, I love this. And like, shout out to Amy, who's like, chiming in here and saying, yeah, like, what do our teachers tell us? Like, what are, or our
Parents,
parents,
yeah,
what are our parents teaching us? What are we exposed to? Right. And like, even are we asking better questions to
right.
get right? So, and I think, especially, so many of my clients have come to me because they're like, they just don't know anymore
Hmm.
because we cycle our own stories and our own beliefs about what's possible, and we need help to be like, oh wait, it's way beyond this.
Hmm.
And like you said, it's like when we don't have exposure to things, we don't even know what's possible, because of exposure, but also because like there's innovation and creativity and something greater than ourselves that may play a part of it all, that shows us something on the total other side of the world. So I'm curious if you have any go-to like sources for like, I think you're really creative. So like, do you have go-to sources for like, how do I get out of my own hamster wheel mind about what I think is possible, and whether it's getting inspiration or getting out of the box of the thinking? Like, are there things that you gravitate towards to help you with that?
Not in any sort of organized fashion.
Mm,
I do look at what other people are doing.
mm,
There is a sense of, okay, wait, if I see at least one other person doing it, that means it's
mm,
possible. And that's
mm,
why having role models and, we talk representation matters. Like, that's why that matters. If you're seeing at least one person doing it, then you're like, oh,
right.
okay, this is real. Um, so, I remember the first phone call I met when I had the inkling of a thought that I might want to start my own business was the one friend I knew that had
Mm,
left the agency world years ago. We were like not even friends. I would say we were maybe acquaintances. We were classmates in college and journalism school. And
mm,
she had pivoted a long time ago. And I just knew that I needed to talk to her
mm,
because I needed to know that it was real. That like this thing that I'm seeing online, like, is that sustainable? Like, what was it like? Could you do it? And she was gracious enough to just like chat it out and give me some advice. Um, and so that was kind of the first, you mentioned seedling. That was like the seedling of an idea that, okay,
mm.
she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
The other things for creativity and options to get out of my own like hamster wheel, you said, like to get off the hamster wheel and out of my
Mm,
head, a lot of times it's just taking space.
mm,
Like whatever it is that I'm on the hamster wheel about, I need to remove myself
mm,
from it completely. Trying to find more sources of creativity or inspiration or things like that actually makes it worse. But
mm.
that's how my brain works. It's just overloading information. Um, so I will get into a rut of like, well, if I can't make this choice or if I can't get out of this rut, then I can just do more research. No, don't do that. You'll just get stuck. And the more information you ever been to the Cheesecake Factory?
Yeah.
Our menu is like 80 pages. It takes like an hour to
Grilled
choose.
artichokes. That's it. That's all I'm doing. I'm not even looking. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it's
God,
crazy.
I haven't been since I was a teenager, but I remember that there's this sensation of too much information is actually,
Mm.
analysis by process by analysis, right? It's too much. So I find that the healthiest response in those moments is just to take some space, just to do something totally different.
Wise words from Susanna. I couldn't agree more. And I think I spent a lot of my time when I was like in jobs where I was feeling defeated or whatever, and just couldn't get filled up by the job itself. I was out there going to like networking things, and I was out there listening to other speakers and trying to be inspired by the external. And as I've gotten older, realizing I need to go inside. And I think that also, just to speak about the representation piece, is going inside, I think, right, and taking space and listening to our inner wisdom, um, doesn't then takes the pressure off of being able to see ourselves out there in that thing, because there's so much yet to be created. And so even that can be limiting because we're not honoring some deeper knowing of what's possible for ourselves, because we're waiting to see it.
That's true. That's true. And I will say that is the caveat of seeing other people out there. You have to be careful with
Mm,
that I needed to
Mm-hmm.
see that it was possible,
Yeah.
but then I had to shut the door to it because then it started to dictate how I was going to move and operate in the space.
Yeah.
So this is maybe going to call me out because I know that I'm very different in this, but my first experience with imposter syndrome actually came when I launched my business.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't experience imposter syndrome in the corporate world. I I felt calm, cool, collected, learning, but like I felt, like I was earning my place. Um, when I threw myself out there, I saw all these people that somehow like had it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people were running their businesses in the same way. It felt very cookie cutter. And when I entered doing things a little bit differently, instead of saying like, oh, we just do things differently, because I felt outnumbered and because I saw the way that things should be, there's those words again,
Mm-hmm.
I started to wonder if I was missing something, because I had just broken out of, deciding what was possible. And the second I got out there, suddenly what was possible became limited again. I
Mm-hmm.
was only seeing it in one particular way. So that is the distinction and kind of the nuance between looking to others to see what's possible and then putting a limit on how much we're going to let what we see dictate what's possible. You have to balance the
Yes.
two.
Yes. And that imposter syndrome, like, look, first of all, like, that I think every entrepreneur faces that, whether they want to admit it or not. Myself too. I hit my walls of like, bah, am I okay to do this? Like, am I qualified? Absolutely. I think it's just part of the journey. I think of when we put ourselves outside of our comfort zone and we're doing something new, like, it's like a safety mechanism, right? It's like, ooh, like, and that's a good thing, if we know how to push past the discomfort of that and to look at the truth of it as opposed to the inner critic side of it.
Right.
But I think you're absolutely right. And I've told a story, though, I don't think in this environment, like, about like limiting beliefs that I've had, based on, uh, growing up with a cleft lip and palate, looking very different from everybody else, and seeds of doubt being embedded into me in terms of like what's possible for me. Oh, I'm not going to be able to be a model was literally said to me, and then a few years ago, I saw a woman who's also Native American who was born with a cleft lip and palate, and she is a model. And so and also, um, like, legit, like Sephora. And so I keep this because this is her, and it says the sky is the limit. And it's like,
Wow.
here's the thing about limiting beliefs, right? They're not freaking true. So we have to pay attention to what we're listening to, what we're letting in, what we're internalizing, so that we can realize that, nobody knows what's possible. No, nobody knows. And I'm getting all fired up because I just love that you're being an example to others of like what is possible for changing your dream, for taking a left turn, for trying something. Even if you end up saying, I'm going to course correct again, I think we overuse the word failure. We're
Yeah.
just experimenting and learning in life, period. Like, I'm not even sure there's ever a place to use that word failure. And actually, failure comes from, I think it came from bankruptcy. It came from a financial
Hmm.
um, uh, like arena or situation, right?
Yeah.
And now we just use it I think, in very bad ways. Um,
I was talking to someone recently about failure. I was like, I wonder why I'm so afraid of failure, because I actually, if you like back me up against the wall, I don't think I've ever actually properly failed.
right,
And yet we're like paralyzed by the fear that we might fail, when either you're right, we're not actually failing. And even if we did, so what?
right,
Well, of course, correct. There are very few failures out there in life so bad
right.
that we can't adjust.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're making me think of, I think my first guest of the year, his name was Bear Brown, and the topic of our conversation was second chances. And
Mm,
this is a guy who was convicted of a felony at a young age, like in his like early 20s or late teens. Um, and he's living like an amazing life of service, and it's like we forget, like I think we can be so hard on ourselves,
mhm.
and beat ourselves up. And it's like, and then we have these messages from society about like, well, this ageism, or like if you haven't done this by that age, and like it's over. It's all of that is baloney crap.
Right.
Um, so I'm curious, like you know, what your counsel is for people that are like, I think there's a lot of people in this moment in time that are like looking at their lives kind of like you did and decided to go after your dream, you know. What's your advice for people who are like, I know that this isn't it, I just don't know, like where or what is next? Like what would you kind of counsel them?
I would take one step back and talk to the people that haven't even quite gotten to the point where they know that it's not it. Maybe they just, I think that there's a lot of people that are just going through the motions,
Mm,
so
mm,
busy, especially people that have careers and are also parents and maybe are taking care of their parents. Like there's a lot happening in
mm,
life. And so it almost feels like there's not even time to stop and take stock in whether or not what we're doing
mm,
is what we need to be doing. Um, so I would say
mm,
that the first step is there to not use busyness
mm,
as an excuse of like, well, this is just the way things are. Um, so the first step is just, as we talk, is stillness, right? Like,
mm,
am I fulfilled? Where are the places I'm not fulfilled? What am I missing?
mm, mm,
Where does what I have right now, if we're talking career in particular, like where is this job filling me? Where is it
mm,
draining me? What am I missing? Maybe the answer is actually it's perfect for what I need right now.
mm,
Um, so you might find things that you might find people to say like, I'm feeling bored and I need more of a challenge. But you might have someone else in the exact same job that says, I'm actually balancing so many other things outside of life that I like, that I can like almost phone it in a little bit. Like I can do the job because I know it like the back of my hand. So this is actually the perfect job for me.
mm,
But really the first step is taking stock. Um, and then after that, if they do come to the realization that, gosh, this is not it, what is it then? It really is going back to the core, asking questions you probably haven't asked yourself in a long time.
mm,
What do I love? What was my favorite topic in school? What were the things that I always enjoyed the most?
mm,
Who was my favorite teacher? What are the favorite trips that I've taken? Like, think about those moments where you've really felt in your element and felt really fulfilled and, most importantly, at peace, where you
mm,
don't feel tugged in a lot of directions. Um, and start kind of making those lists of things that you want to avoid and things that you love. And I think you'll almost have like, like in dating, you have like a list of things that you want in a guy and things that you definitely don't want in like a partner. That's kind of what you're going to end up doing with your career direction. You'll look at your list and be like, well, I never want to commute to an office again. Okay, so like that removes all of the in-office positions. And I really want to be home when my kids get home from school, so I need a flexible schedule. Okay, so now you're looking at it like a different type of thing. You're not looking for a job that expects you to be on 9 to 5. And so you'll find that that list has things on it that aren't just job related, like being home when your kids get home from school. Like I did something that I never thought that I'd be able to do, which was I took an entire month off of work because I needed to catch up with family I hadn't seen in 7 years. And I didn't want to have part of my brain always thinking about that email that I needed to respond to, even if I was taking time off. So I structured my entire business around taking a month off. That was something that I didn't know that I needed until I sat down to think about it.
mm, mm,
So like I have built a business that allows me to not just have flexibility in hours or days, but gives me flexibility in the form of weeks or even months. which again was something I didn't even know was possible.
Yeah.
Until I just figured out how to build it. So really, I think it's about centering and asking yourself those questions, and then going out with your list to look at what perhaps the options are. And if it doesn't exist, then create it.
Yes. And this reminds me too, right, of the conversation, like our pre-call, right, about certainly the way that there's privilege in how we can choose to do things,
Yes.
right? And different people have different privileges. Um, and also sometimes we get in our own way, I think, of looking at obstacles that maybe we're putting there versus that are really there. And so there's this delicate balance of how do we open up to what's possible, and also the reality of where we may not have the privilege. And so I know this is important to both of us.
Yeah.
And we don't have all the answers, but just to open that up, I'm just curious what comes to you right now. For those who might be watching who are like, okay, well, you had the luxury of taking a month. I'm like, I don't have that. You know what I mean? Like to help those people to see maybe something new and different about what is possible.
Yeah, I can't tell this story without acknowledging that I had the benefit of going on my husband's health insurance. I had the benefit of not having student debt. Like there are the benefit of being white, where like, and having had corporate experience that I can bring with me to talk to potential new clients as a freelancer. It's definitely been an easier path. I absolutely will acknowledge that. I think that you're right. There's a piece of it that we put these barriers in front of us. There's a lot of people that I've spoken to that say like, well, like I'm the primary breadwinner. I can't quit my job. Like, first of all, I would never advise anyone, especially if you're the primary breadwinner, to just quit your job. But I think that there are more nuanced options. I didn't quit my job until I started to make really good money on this. Like you have to test the proof of concept. So I think that there are things that we can do to test the waters without giving up our security that for so many people is so crucial. For most of us need to work to pay the bills. And so it doesn't mean, when we say like being risk averse, we're not saying be ridiculous, right?
Right.
We're being realistic.
Right.
It needs to be realistic. Right. But I also think that this doesn't only have to affect people that are trying to make a giant shift in life. These questions that we're talking about, finding what you're missing and figuring out how to fill in the blank, can be small shifts. If we're going back to the example of like, it's really important to me to be home when the school bus arrives. That was like, I use that example because that was my mom. Like she changed her whole career because she wanted to be able to go home from school. And so maybe that's just about like talking to your manager about trading shifts with someone. Like, hey, like I really want to work the super early morning so that I can be like, is there a different shift? So it doesn't mean having to throw everything and all the security out the window to be able to look inward to find the things that will make your life better, that will make your life more fulfilled, that will bring you more joy. It might be something super small that is doable even in your current, whether it's your current role or your current company, or you don't have to leave to create this or find this fulfillment.
Well, and it makes me think of the I believe it was green pill you talked about earlier, right? Like that we're in, whether we work for ourselves or we work for somebody else or what have you. I think that if we're like, oh, well, this is what it is. This is the sandwich that I've been given and I have to eat it, as opposed to like, wait a minute, like my needs have changed, something has changed. What can I ask for? What conversations can I have? What seeds can I plant? What solutions can I offer? And I think especially women, that we don't, it doesn't come to us to like, oh, like ask for what we need or state what we need.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
An example that I gave like early in my career, I don't know if Amy is still here, there was a project that I really wanted to work on, and I thought it would be really fulfilling and a part of my creativity that I hadn't tapped into for a while. And I simply went to her office and asked if she needed help. I didn't expect a yes, but I figured I could just ask. And
I'm imagining that was probably
place.
scary. It was probably scary to ask and fearing rejection and all that good stuff.
Right, but it brought me extra joy to the job because I was doing something that was back to the whole topic, practical passion. It was like scratching that little itch of things that I knew that I loved. Right. And so it was bringing additional passion to the job that I already had, just because I asked a question.
Yeah, and I'm going to use an example of myself too to make this point, because I think it's really important for people. Right, we're kind of talking about deconditioning. We're kind of talking about ask yourself what you want and what you need, right? Taking stock in the stillness. And one of the things, that I've always looked at people that have different color in their hair, or maybe they have tattoos, and it's always like, oh, that's so cool, or oh, that's and because of my conditioning, maybe I never even gave myself permission to say, can I do that? Is it okay to do that? Especially having had a corporate career. And so for the first time in my life, I'm 42 years old, I put color in my hair.
I love it.
But it was more about reminding myself I have choice. I get to choose and take it or leave it. If you don't like it, then you're not for me, and I'm, what I mean, and that's okay. But so we can do these small things, I think, to push our envelope a little bit, to get a little uncomfortable, practice getting uncomfortable, so that when you're ready to make a big change, you've experienced the discomfort in your nervous system, and you're going to be okay.
The best advice that I got from someone recently who helps people work through this kind of stuff was, whenever you have one of those thoughts of oh, I can't color my hair, or I can't just raise my hand for that, whatever it may be, to ask yourself, where did I learn that? Where did that actually come from? Trace it back, try to find where that came from, and then decide okay, but is it true?
Right.
And based on whether it's true, then say, okay, well, then how do I want to move forward? Based on this new information that I've realized, what do I want to decondition? What do I want to unlearn? And then what do I want to replace that learning with? Yes.
What's the new narrative? And I love that Ashley says, love it. You're the only person that has agency over your life. True. Yes. Say it again, Sam. Nobody else. And nobody else is going to be your advocate. And nobody else is going to sit there. I don't know about you, Susana, but nobody's gonna sit there and say, take that risk, go and do it. People are you have to maybe make some choices without a whole cheerleading squad behind you, because it's a different choice than what we're used to and what people are comfortable with. And so sometimes I think I think that's why I think it's so brave and courageous for you to do what you've done, because I know even if you had some support, I know it wasn't nearly what it should be to encourage people to follow their truth and honor their dreams.
Yeah, I was really worried about disappointing people. And I think that there probably were some people that were disappointed. Because something we haven't really talked about is the dreams other people have for us.
For you, yes.
And by making that choice, I threw the dreams that a few other people had for me out the window.
Yeah.
And my people-pleasing self was like, oh gosh, did I let them down? But at the end of the day, it didn't matter, because it's not their dream, it's mine.
Right. And the most important thing is you don't let yourself down.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Yes. And look, you can still honor the amazing things that those people have done for you, and the way that they've helped to grow you and equip you, and cheer you on so far, without being beholden to the plan that they had for you.
And
that's a suggestion.
Yeah, no, and other people's ideas, other people's feelings about your choices is not your burden. That's for them to deal with,
True.
Where is it? If they're disappointed, then maybe they need to look at themselves and say, where am I disappointed in myself? It's often, people project. That's a whole nother dang, girl. It's the top of the hour. I want to honor your time. This has been so amazing. I feel like we need a part 2.
This is good. I feel like we could talk forever.
Yeah, but what I want to do too is I just want to offer, share a little space to say, okay, Susana, how do you work with people? How can they get in touch with you? If they're like, I want to do my thing, help me. Yeah, share a little bit more about the business that you're building and have built and how you love to help people.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that I do freelance copywriting for corporate and agency clients. But for most people on here, in fact, I have some clients that tuned in, which is amazing. I help a lot of people who are in the same sort of at the same crossroads that I found myself at, that they want to do something new. So these are a lot of people that have corporate jobs, but they're really looking to make the leap. I like to say, jump off the corporate ladder without breaking any bones. I help them do that. Like, I give you the parachute. And so I help people not only put together a plan for like what they need to do to prepare to make that shift, but also put together the business. What is the business idea? What are you going to be selling or doing or offering? And that extends into, okay, so what are your brand values and positioning? How are you going to put yourself in the market? Extends all the way into launching a website, creating systems. How are you going to invoice and take payment? It's really kind of the full package shebang for how do you go from employee to business owner and all the things required to get to that point. So that's really how I help people. And it's been a joy to watch 10 people make that leap since I started this business.
Oh my gosh, so fulfilling, right? Like,
I just want, like, once people realize, like, they've asked themselves these questions and they're like, this is what's it for me. The fact that I can jump in and then help make that happen. Like, oh, I just want to bring people on this ride with me. If you figure out what you need, like, let's go get it.
oh, I love that. It's clear. And so where can people find you? Your website or email, or how can people get in touch?
My website is susanaboey.com. Same as my handle here. And you can email me at hello@susanaboey.com. I try to make things really simple. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. There's a button to schedule a free call with me if you just want to ask some questions and tell me what you're going through and where you want to go.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you guys check her out. It's Boey,
Yeah.
Susana Boey. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for your time for this conversation. I already know that, you've touched so many folks by sharing your beautiful story, your truths, and your hard-earned lessons along the way. So thank you for your transparency and vulnerability, because I can't do this platform without guests that are willing to share their story, and I think it changes lives. So thank you for
Thanks for
being here
having
today.
me. It was a joy.
Yay! Yay! Yeah, great time. This is great. And thanks for all of you joining live, and after the fact. And yeah, get in touch with Susana. She'll remind you it's okay to change your dream and then help you figure out how to do it. So
It's definitely okay. It's encouraged, in fact.
yes, yes. I might be calling you. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Well, thanks again, and ciao for now.
Bye. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. See you later.